afternoon. I'd like to commence, and I'm sure I'm talking on behalf of everyone here, to thank Giovanni Pisona for organising this forum, and also, of course, he is the instigator of the Skillman network and the Skillman concept, which I must say originally was mainly focusing upon Europe, but now it's truly international. And I know that in Asia Pacific there's a great interest in joining the network and being part of it. I know that in China there's a great interest in being involved. And many of you will know about the China Belt and Road project, which is highly influential, traces the footprints of Marco Polo from Italy and the Silk Road, but is an expanded version. And they are very, very interested in being involved with the Skillman concept. I'm in fact an advisor to the Belt and Road project, and they have said to me very strongly how interested they are in being part of this network. And Giovanni himself was recently in China and was having discussions with them. So Skillman isn't just for Europe, it is actually for the world, which I think is very exciting and increases its sphere of influence. Now, what I'd like to speak about this afternoon is the question of education and training systems in response to Industry 4.0 needs, and also the importance of ethical issues. I have a number of positions. I'm involved with Skillman, but I'm also a professor at RMIT University in Melbourne, which is the main vet university in Australia. Also, I have a position as a UNESCO chair in TVET and sustainable development. Let me say, I know here in Europe you mainly talk about VET, but back in 1999, there was a World Congress in Shanghai with ministers from throughout the world, ministers for labour and for education, with the ILO and UNESCO and many others. And at that meeting, it was felt that this term is used in different parts of the world in many different ways, and it creates some confusion. So although we're still using VET here in Europe, the agreement at that meeting in 1999 was that the definition or the term to be used internationally, whether you're in a developed country or a developing country, a transition economy or a well-developed economy, would be TVET, Technical and Vocational Education and Training, which really is very similar to VET. Some would say it's actually identical, but it is the term that is used now and has been since 1999 in most places to refer to skills development for employability. So when I'm talking about TVET, I'm also, of course, talking about VET in terms of the European context. So today, I want to focus upon examining the importance of education and training, when I'll be using the term TVET, to respond to meeting the needs of Industry 4.0 and the fourth industrial revolution. Also the importance of this area in promoting sustainable development, in looking at environmental issues, including the greening of economies, and looking at not just the impact on existing employment, but in fact on emerging new types of employment. Also the importance of this area, not just in preparing people to work in the labour force in terms of their skills, but in promoting social justice, fairness, equity. And it's now believed increasingly that this area of TVET, or VET as you may want to call it, has a very important role to play, quite apart from developing technical skills, employment skills. It has a very important part to play in the greening of economies. We need to look at the greening of jobs, both existing jobs and emerging jobs. It has a very important role when it comes to reducing the marginalisation of women and girls that occurs in many countries, including those who live in remote areas, including those who are economically disadvantaged and so on. So what I want to say is more than just preparing people with the skills to gain a job, it also has much broader social implications as well as economic implications. So in my presentation today, I want to talk a bit about the major changes, the mega trends that are occurring and are affecting the global and national economies and societies. What are these megatrends, and in what way are they impacting on the sort of work that we do when it comes to TVET? And also the fact that this area of skills is the foundation of human capital, the importance of green skills, the importance of transferability in terms of skills, and of course the fundamental importance of lifelong learning and the ability to learn how to learn, to be an independent learner. Now, what is the role of TVET in terms of meeting changing workforce needs and challenges in the light of the fourth industrial revolution and Industry 4.0? And what role does it have to play in contributing to inclusive growth? That is growth that benefits all sections of the community, not just a few or a minority. And what about the ethical issues when it comes to promoting greater social justice, fairness and equity in all our societies? What role does TVET have to play? So what I'm suggesting is it goes well beyond the traditional definitions of skills development for employability and looking at TVET as a way of preparing people for employment. Now, what I'd like to suggest is that in many parts of the world now, but not all parts of the world, there's an increasing emphasis on the importance of re-engineering TVET for change. A need to rethink in fundamental ways how TVET can best meet workforce needs and societal needs for the individual, their families, the community and so on. And it's being argued increasingly that we have to think radically about the re-engineering of TVET for change. And what re-engineering means is not just tinkering with the system, making a small adjustment here and a small adjustment there, but fundamentally rethinking the system. Now, of course, some of the characteristics will be maintained because they're very effective and very useful, but we have to think in radical ways. As an analogy, think of a bridge that's been in existence for a very long period of time. And over time, the demands upon that bridge change. There's more traffic, there's heavier loads to be carried and so on. We can keep working on that bridge and adjusting the existing design. We can broaden the bridge, we can strengthen the bridge to take semi-trailers and so on, as against what was passing over the bridge originally, horse and cart and things like that. We can do that, but is it going to satisfy the needs? Or do we have to deconstruct the bridge and re-engineer it? Think to ourselves, we're not going to just look at the existing bridge. We're going to think about what sort of bridge we want and then construct it accordingly, re-engineer it. So what I'm suggesting is it's being increasingly felt by development agencies, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, and so on, in all parts of the world, both the developed world and the developing world, and the countries where there's major transition, is we have to fundamentally think about the re-engineering of TVET. Of course, we don't throw everything out. There are things there that are very, very helpful and have stood the test of time. But there are things that are now required where the old bridge will no longer meet the needs, and we shouldn't be constrained by that. We have to think outside the box. The second thing is the importance of adopting a holistic approach to TVET. People often think about TVET as being educating the hands. You know, they think traditionally of motor mechanics and electricians and people who are involved with applied occupations. But the reality is that TVET is increasingly intellectual in nature. It isn't just preparing people for what are called blue-collar jobs. It's preparing people for white-collar jobs. It involves the use of the internet. It involves the use of robotics. It involves the use of artificial intelligence. All of these are important for this area of TVET. But it's felt that we shouldn't still be mainly stressing the education of the hand. And I'm wondering whether you're aware of the work of John Dewey, the American philosopher of education, who was at Teachers College, Columbia. And he spoke about the need to adopt a holistic approach to education, including this area of TVET. And that is the 3 H's. In our TVET programs, many of us are concerned with mainly educating the hand, right? What about the head? The intellectual aspects? And some would say, increasingly important, the heart, the 3 H's. So we should be looking at the re-engineering of our TVET programs to educate the hand, the head, and the heart. The importance of ethics, of values, questioning our taken for granted assumptions, and making sure that we go about our work in a way which is morally defensible, which considers the needs of society, not just the needs of the individual to have a job that brings home an income, to enable them to provide shelter for themselves and food for themselves and so on. The social location of work and the contribution work has to make to the betterment of society. And if we're looking at the betterment of society in terms of issues like environmental issues, reducing the carbon footprint, the greening of work, existing work. So for example, just a very simple example, say there's a motor mechanic who takes the oil out of a car to change the oil on the car. Or there's a hairdresser who is working to dye people's hair and so on. What do they do with the waste product? What do they do with the oil that comes out of that car? What do they do with the chemicals that they've been using in their hairdressing salon? Just choosing 2 very simple examples. Do they go and pour it down the sink? And then it goes out and has repercussions in terms of pollution and things like that? Or do they do something different? Do they actually engage in recycling? Now, I've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to have to go through the rest of what I'm going to say fairly quickly, but I have a chance to speak tomorrow as well about research on these things, because we have to be evidence-based in what we do, not just talking about things, but actually looking at the available evidence. I want to very briefly just identify the 5 megatrends. And PricewaterhouseCoopers did some very extensive research, and they produced a report in 2018. They interviewed businesses, TVET providers, and many others to look at what people felt were the major trends impacting on the world of work and the way in which we prepare people for employment. And they spoke about the 5 trends there: urbanisation, climate change and resource scarcity, a shift in the global economic power, demographic and social change, and technological breakthroughs. I'll just very briefly refer to each of these. Now, everyone knows about these to varying extents. We know that they are fundamentally changing the world of work and also the skills that people need to be successful in their employment. Nearly half the people in the 2008 PricewaterhouseCoopers survey, which was worldwide and involved, as I said, employers, TVET providers, consumers, people in the labour force. They were worried about the changes, these 5 trends, upon their own particular employment and their job security in particular. Very worried about whether they would lose their jobs over time because of the changing configuration of employment. However, they all agreed that technology could actually help to improve their job security if they were able to harness it. So the first megatrend is this one of the urban agenda. The fact that there is this great move to the cities. We are becoming increasingly urbanised societies. We know in the developing countries, in China and so on, millions of people. China with a population of 1.3 billion, millions of people are moving on a weekly basis into the city areas, leaving the countryside and going into the cities. This has an enormous impact upon the rates of urbanisation, the types of jobs that are required in cities compared to country areas and so on. If we look at these cities, New York, Beijing, Shanghai and London, they are generating enormous amounts of infrastructure investment. This obviously has a major impact upon employment opportunities, whereas the country areas no longer have the same sort of focus they used to. These cities are going to dominate when it comes to our economic development, our social development and our culture. And therefore we need to look at what impact does this sort of thing have on consume an enormous quantity of the world's natural resources. And they also contribute a lot to the environmental problems that we're facing. And that slide talks about cities consuming 75% of the world's natural resources and accounting for 80% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. What can we do about this, and what are the implications for resource depletion and climate change? Cities and urbanisation are really dominating in terms of the configuration of employment opportunities and the 4 interconnected goals for work and industry, which are reducing environmental problems, increasing economic growth, reducing unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, and increasing equity or equality. The second mega trend is that of climate change and scarce resources. We all are very aware of climate change. There are some deniers, of course, like the American president. However, I think if you look at the science on this whole situation, it's very clear that there is climate change, and this is going to have a great effect on resource scarcity and on people's lifestyles. Often people who deny the importance of climate change are doing so for political reasons, to maintain their support from the business sector, for example, or from people working in particular factories, but they do that for their political benefit, or even though it might be jeopardising the future of the planet and our societies. The whole question of rising sea levels and more natural disasters, and you've read a lot, I'm sure, recently about countries in the Pacific that are going to cease to exist because of rising. The Maldives, many of the Pacific Island communities are going to cease to exist because they are only just a few feet above sea level. And with the melting of the polar ice caps and so on, they're going to have increasing problems in terms of sea levels, but also natural disasters, and you're aware of that as well. So what about resource shortages and human security? With a population of 8.3 billion by 2030, we're going to need 50% more energy, 40% more water, 35% more food. What implications does this have for labour force characteristics, the sort of jobs that people are doing in terms of providing energy, water and food? And the whole question of renewable energy, not relying mainly on coal and oil and gas, but looking at renewables. That has an impact upon the sort of occupational groups that will be in demand. The third megatrend is that of the demographic and social change. And I mentioned already about the growth of cities, but if we look at demographic and social change, okay, every country, continent and region is different, but how do we, within the various countries and so on, cater for the special needs of various groups within society? And what about the benefits of an older workforce? In Singapore, for example, they have a situation called there from retire to rehire. They're taking people who meet a certain retirement age and then they retrain them. They re-engineer their skills, if you like, and give them the chance to work for much longer, because people are living longer in those sorts of societies. What about the benefits for women workers? Now, in many parts of the world, women and girls are not given equal access. It isn't TVET for all, really. It's TVET mainly for boys and men. What do we do to improve the quality of what's available for women and girls? What about the underemployed? Disguised unemployment is a big problem in many countries. People say they have jobs and they're seen as having jobs and counted as having jobs, but in fact you've got 3 people doing what would normally be a job for one person. You have disguised unemployment. And what about young people? We know that it creates great social upheaval when there are large numbers of young people who can't get employment. You think of the Arab Spring, which is very much linked to so many young people not having employment opportunities, being dependent upon their parents, being full of dreams and expectations, and having nowhere to go when it comes to earning an income, establishing their own families and so on. The fourth megatrend I'll refer to is the shift in global economic power. I mean, the reality is that the power is moving away from Europe, isn't it? I mean, the way of the world now, in terms of the future future development and political influence is Asia and Africa. These are the two areas that are really going to have an enormous impact upon economic and social considerations in the world. So it's not going to stay this way much longer. I mean, China is increasing its influence dramatically. We all know the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Well, some people are talking about the decline and fall of America, aren't they? That it's a very old economy, it's not adapting, and therefore it's going to in fact have big problems. China is expanding. It won't be long before China is the largest economy in the world. And India is very, very important. India could replace the United States as the world's second largest economy by 2050. Enormous populations. China 1.3 billion, India about 1.2 billion. It's always hard to get really accurate figures. So there's a great shift in power, economic power and social and political power. And of course, Africa. 50% of the population of Africa live on less than $1.25 per day. This is dramatically changing, and so much is occurring in Africa that's going to have a profound effect upon all of us in Europe as well as elsewhere. And the fifth megatrend I'll refer to is technological breakthroughs. Well, we're all so aware of that, aren't we? It affects us on a daily basis. The fact that we have very fast connectivity with the internet, the growth of robotics, which is part of the characteristics of the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, and a great fear, isn't there, that artificial intelligence is moving ahead very rapidly. This, of course, is creating employment opportunities. But you remember Stephen Hawking, who died a little while ago, the professor in the UK, was very concerned, as many people are, that will artificial intelligence in fact be more intelligent than us? Will in fact the machines be able to control us? Because you know, I'm sure you know already, that artificial intelligence isn't just to do with intellectual skills, calculation skills and things like that. We are now programming machines to be able to be empathetic, to have feelings, to be able to manipulate people, to pay, like human beings as part of their social characteristics are manipulative, aren't they? They play a bit of a game, you know, they say this to this person with a view to getting a particular result with someone. Now, traditionally, artificial intelligence wasn't able to do that, but now it's being programmed to have the very characteristics of human beings in terms of empathy, in terms of tactical, in terms of social interaction, and there is this concern that maybe that's going to have an adverse effect upon us, and we're going to lose our control, lose our power over our own destinies. The connectivity issue is very, very important, a massive increase in connectivity between individuals and businesses. And e-commerce is really taking off, isn't it? In many countries, the shops in the high street are closing down because people are buying things on the internet. I work with Alibaba in China, in a place called Hangzhou. They are enormous e-commerce providers. And Alibaba in China and Amazon in America are both now international in their spread, and they can supply products at a lower cost than shops, and people are being able to get a feel for the products, not just have a picture, but actually have a virtual reality. They're buying cars and refrigerators and all sorts of things through e-commerce, and no longer going to their general shop. So the importance of everything being connected, the importance of the changing landscape of technology. Now, the new technologies, of course, create demand for particular types of jobs, emerging jobs. But also, what the internet revolution has done in particular is that it's made TVET more affordable. There was a long time when organisations like the World Bank were not investing so much in TVET programs because it was too expensive per student. Because you have to have equipment, you've got to have hands-on experience and so on with equipment, you've got to have industry donating machines. If you're training people to be in the printing industry, you've got to have printing presses that they can practice with. Now it can all be done through virtual reality. And for the last 3 years I've been working in the Middle East. I've been working in Doha, And there they've got the most sophisticated ways of preparing people to operate oil refineries and gas processing plants. They sit in a room and they get to know it so well that when they move into the labour force, it's a seamless transition. And it's all done through role-playing, through simulation and through gaming. So it's very affordable. So TVET now is much cheaper per student than it used to be. So what are the implications of these megatrends for business and the world of work? I've already run out of time, so I can't go through the detail, but we're looking at things like multi-skilling, the importance of that, transferability of skills, digital revolution, the impact on what sort of jobs are occurring and so on, and the importance of looking at environmental issues, sustainable development issues, greening issues, climate change issues, and what we can do to make sure that we reconfigure and re-engineer TVET to accommodate these very big challenges within our society as part of the fourth industrial revolution. So what are some of the takeaway messages I want to try and convey this morning? The first is the fact that megatrends are affecting global and national economies and societies and have implications for the world of work in TVET. That economic and workplace changes are making human capital increasingly important. That skills are the foundation of human capital, green skills, transferability skills. That these are the foundation of skills for Industry 4.0 and the 21st century, and the need to re-engineer education for change and to adopt a holistic approach when it comes to our TVET programs. My last comment is, I did a very big study over the last 3 years in Asia, and I'm not saying it necessarily applies here, but I did case studies in India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka and Vietnam, a team of 15 consultants, both national and international, and one of the things that came through very clearly from interviews with business and so on, big business firms, CEOs, is a great disappointment with what's being done by TVET providers. The TVET providers are out of date, they're backward-looking, they're not forward-looking, they're not preparing people to meet the needs of Industry 4.0, and increasingly industry saying, we're going to have to train and educate people ourselves. We can't rely upon the TVET providers because they're too conservative, they're too backward-looking, the people who are training within the TVET sector are not up to date, are not experienced with what the emerging needs are, they're backward-looking, because they come out of a system that is dying. And this is a big challenge for, I think, TVET providers to consider. Thank you very much.